Okay, so shall we proceed to the next speaker? And I would like to introduce my dear friend and colleague Irina Didkovska. I met her quite recently after the war broke out in Ukraine, when I was forced to leave Belarus, and Inna was already living in Israel, and she had where she experienced the other war, where she moved to Israel after the war broke out in Ukraine. So it was the meeting between two people affected by wars. But this experience of connectedness gave me strength and inspiration. And when we were preparing for this conference, there was this request from interpreters for any sort of materials you might be able to provide. And it was very hard. It was a very difficult task for our friends from Ukraine. For Inna, it was very difficult to define the theme, to choose the topic for the presentation was a difficult process, because the war context also affects our self shaping, our self-development, our experience of the here and now becomes very direct. And when yesterday I got the working draft of Irina's presentation, I was surprised that there was no mention of the war. But Inna said she didn't want this Gestalt approach in the context of Ukraine to be discussed only and exclusively in relation to the war. And so I would like to introduce Inna Didkovska on this note, and she will present Ukraine and Israel. She's someone who inspires, but also she draws inspiration from others, and she believes that the world is larger than the war. There's more to the world than just the war. And so, okay, thank you for this warm introduction, and I would like to thank the Łódź School of Gestalt for this invitation. I am grateful. I see 46 participants here online. I am grateful to you for coming here, even though no topic is listed on the agenda next to my name. There's no title of my presentation on the agenda. I'll just check the technical settings. I will speak Russian because this is my native language. I also speak Ukrainian and English, but today I chose to speak Russian for this particular presentation. And just like the previous people, I would like to ask all attendees to switch on your cameras, if possible. I really like looking at people rather than just black boxes on the screen, and I am a Gestalt therapist. And for me, it's 25 years or 35 years even, and I've been working as director of the Gestalt Institute in Kyiv. And we've been working in Ukraine for more than 20 years. And now I am in India. I'm really interested in everything that's related to the field, to Gestalt theories. And I wanted to refer to Pels's biography. He was a migrant. He fled before the Nazis, and so but I'm not going to discuss this further in my presentation because it was already discussed today. It's a very interesting topic, but it's also a question of one of the participants. How does this affect the founders, the founding figures? How did their migration experience influence the practice and theory of Gestalt? It's a very interesting topic, really, and I also tried to address it. But for starters, I wanted to talk about this empty space on the agenda. Yes, I did freeze at the start of the war. I did freeze my activity. I have hardly appeared anywhere since the outbreak of the war. And thank you, Lena, for inviting me here. It is a challenge, but since the start of the war, I have appeared, I don't know, in 2 conferences, Madrid and another one in Italy, and I was actually forced to speak, but I had no strength to attend or to speak at any conferences. I directed all my strength to supporting the institute and to support the Ukrainians in this way. For the first months, we worked free of charge, and we put a lot of strength, we put a lot of efforts to support people at the very start of the war. And a part of this is related to trauma related to displacement. And we talked about this myth when Heracles actually raised Antiochus above the ground, and many people were uprooted in this way. They lost their strength, and so this is in this very direct and literate sense. They lost their land, they lost their point of anchorage. And so I also visited India a couple of years ago. This is another home of mine, and in this context, there was this question how it influenced Perl's life and his work. And I thought how this influenced me and why I chose Gestalt as my basic lifestyle, I could say, a style of thinking. Because in March 1942, my grandmother decided to leave. She made this choice to leave her family home because the Germans came very close to that city, and they said, okay, go for 3 days, then you'll come back. 5 sisters stayed with their children because they wanted to keep living on their own land. The Germans took the city, and they just killed everyone. And when I came to Israel, I found all my ancestors, and I realized why I was there, because my grandmother had made that choice. And so I want to refer to Jean-Marie's presentation when he said that a crisis was also about making a choice, about deciding whether to leave or not. And there are some things I have no influence on. Okay, I believe that even before the war, I would make those choices. I would have several homes. I have this other small house even before the war, and it came in handy when the war started. And due to that other home, I went to Israel to touch my roots. And when we are uprooted, when we are being detached from our roots, we actually want to try and touch them. And when I came to Ukraine, there was this
переживала эту страну как дом. Но то, что к тебе могут отнестись,
when I came back, I saw this sign at the airport, "Welcome home." I didn't realize it was my home, but the fact that someone tells you "Welcome home," you know, and treats you like a person who's coming back home, this was really a profound experience for me. And
создавать вот этот дом, который мы фактически...
So I wasn't thinking about that other country as my home. And it's really about home that you carry within you. I can say about my grandmother, who for 4 years, she had only one suitcase. And when she came back, when she went back home, Erin had been destroyed, and her loved ones weren't there. So this is the experience of homelessness we talk about during this conference, and something that I'm very grateful for to our organizers. And so this is a very topical issue. I was thinking about Gestalt therapy at that early stage Pearls talked about, namely this Gestalt prayer. Unless we meet, you know, it can't be helped. And so I'm not here to, I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations. And I believe that there are a lot of roots in Gestalt that come from the East, from Eastern traditions, and it is because there are a lot of things that are related to actually taking root, and a lot is related to attachment. But this is dangerous because once you develop an attachment, once you take root, this anxiety appears. What will happen when it ends? When it becomes ruptured? And that's what the previous speaker said. Even if relationships are not ecological, rupturing these relations, this is painful. We are all afraid of pain. We don't want to feel pain. This huge pain there is now in Ukraine, which I also deal with in my contact with my colleagues from Ukraine, from Belarus. This is an experience of huge pain. In Ukraine, over the last 2 days, we have had missile attacks, dreadful missile attacks, and bombs have been falling from the sky, shelling, destroying things. And when I ask them, how do you cope? When I ask trainers, when I ask my clients, and they say that the most horrible thing is that the pain never ends. And so I believe that for creating that actually Gestalt therapy was also influenced by the experience of the founding individuals, the experience of the Second World War, but also the fact that they were opposed to the trends that prevailed in the world back then. And so I was wondering, for 3 months while working and experiencing pain, I lost 18 kilograms. And I thought that the Institute wouldn't survive, that we wouldn't survive, that we would be unable to continue to work, that this pain would simply flood us. And I doubted that contemporary Gestalt could help in that situation, because we had all been working in the field of crisis aid. Nevertheless, I started to stand on my feet again, and just like Tara Conrad said, that she would continue to work and to do things, and I started to walk again, so to speak. I spent most of my time either working or lying down, going through this pain. But the point was not to allow this desensitization to happen. Some behavioral approaches talk about that. To be present in this, to be capable of experiencing the pain together with the client. Sometimes you think that your heart won't manage it; it will simply explode. But I come from Bucha. You might have heard about that town and about the tragedy that happened there early on in the war, and about those horrible stories of violence, about those atrocities that took place there. It's a place where I went to school, Bucha and Irpin. And this forced displacement, this uprooting, or actually tearing me out from my very soil, from my very native soil with my roots. I know that we haven't got much time, and I want to delve into personal stories, but I wanted to stick to the basic Gestalt concepts. And I want to stick to where I found meaning. Why Gestalt? What does Gestalt have which made me stick with that current? And Alec, after I felt better after the initial shock after the war broke out, I believe that it was the aspect of choice and how to distinguish what I had influence on from what I didn't have influence on. And during a presentation at the conference in Italy, it turned out that 200 people were listening to me, and they started approaching me and sharing their stories and crying and sharing very personal things. And then I understood I had an influence on something, and that very idea brought me here before you, that perhaps my stories, my point of view of an insider, my inner point of view also might help more people to make a choice, so that every single one of us could experience and realize their potential. And I also believe this to be an outcome of successful Gestalt therapy, namely the possibility of well, realizing one's potential and actually taking into account what's going on around us. I would like to refer to what we talked about also last time at the conference last Saturday, and Tara also talked about this, that we can look at history and see just how many wars, how much violence, how much senseless violence, senseless things have been perpetrated in history. Of course, there is trauma that doesn't make sense, is pointless and forces people to migrate. But there's also trauma that is purposeful. People create wars, and wars lead to violence. Wars lead to destruction of many people, of many lives. And it is in this that other people experience forced displacement, forced migration, among other issues. And I recall this experience and consequently want to share the following reflection. I had a lot of hate towards people living in the country of the aggressor, the country that invaded Ukraine. And this is a reaction, this is the first reaction that emerged. And it took me a long time to start thinking how this could actually develop. And then I started looking at the opposite pole, and I saw some regularities. Maybe it will be of interest to you. I decided to describe it from the point of view of Gestalt therapy. I thought about this pole of emotions, this pole of feelings described by the people living inside terrorist states. It's anxiety, it's fear, it's guilt, a big feeling of shame, a lot of passive aggression inside, because it's impossible to express it. What happens there destroys whatever makes people different. In people's individual nature is actually destroyed. What Peirce wrote about in relation to Nazi Germany, and so a lot can be referred to the personality function. It's about someone being there who is better than me, and so people do it. Either they are forced to, or they simply do that. They kind of hand over their sense of responsibility to the person they believe is better. A lot of Russians have told me that Putin is good, that he will defend them. Also in Belarus, also in Iran, I've heard people say similar things. And this approach that I am nothing and I have no influence on anything, that if I start doing something, they will kill me. And I remember this experience from the States, when we were in the Soviet Union, when we said that Ya is the last letter of the alphabet. Ya means me, and Ya is a letter in the Russian alphabet. And so that nothing is up to me. That's a pun, okay? Ya as a letter and Ya as me. So all these things oriented towards confluence and avoiding diversity and all of escapism and seeking to avoid things. Interestingly enough, many people who support these totalitarian systems, they don't know any foreign languages. It so happens very often. And it's an interesting moment when I also sometimes choose to speak Russian because I would like to influence these very people, to make them have the possibility of, you know, kind of eliciting these things that were pushed to the level of the subconscious, to make them aware of certain things. This is why I speak Russian at times. And so this is related to the fact that in the Soviet Union, there was this time when actually this idea that everything was shared, that everything was common property, that nothing belonged to the individual. And so there's this aspect that some people want to help, want to support the creation of an empire, of an imperium. One person is the leader and kind of manages everything. That's a strong, powerful structure that attacks and also perpetrates a lot of violence. And I started thinking how to look at it from the point of view of Gestalt therapy. And I started wondering where the other pole was. And I started describing the other pole. And basically, there was this sense of resistance. There was this point of risk, also expressing aggression, being yourself, supporting freedom of choice. So I started thinking about these various values we would abide by. Also, the fact that we would look for support in ourselves, also respect for diversity, when people can be themselves. And on the other hand, there's chaos on. So we're kind of losing the connection with the speaker every now and then. I was seeking some mechanisms that I could ascribe to this poem, because I realized that the state as a structure is a tool.
Но что мне показалось интересным? Мне показалось интересным,
that actually is oppressive and it deprives people of freedom. But interestingly enough, it turned out that Gestalt therapy continued to rely on these values. Do you agree? What we build in Gestalt therapy, actually we create this community. And why people want to be part of our community? Well, because they can be themselves, they can talk about themselves, and there is respect for diversity, there is respect for the expression of anger, of other emotions. Everything that's impossible in countries where there's a totalitarian regime, and countries which are kind of connected, you know, Russia, Iran, Belarus, China, North Korea. Their oppression of human personality, their willingness to destroy everyone who fights for their freedom. It seemed interesting to me to note this. I don't know, I wanted to check whether there is some response, some feedback on your part, whether you are following me or whether it's interesting for you what I'm talking about here. Just checking. Yes, it's very interesting. I find it very interesting. I just wanted to say that it seems to me that every psychotherapy provides space for talking about these things that maybe are impossible to address in other communities, that it's not only Gestalt in this case, it's more a property of, yes, of psychotherapy as such. This form started developing after the Second World War, after these traumas, so it was a response in a way to something that people carried inside. So that's more or less that.
Спасибо большое за обратную связь.
Thank you very much for this feedback. It's very supportive for me, and actually, I'm not saying that Gestalt therapy is better than other therapeutic modalities. I'm actually within Gestalt therapy, and I'm seeking to make sense of it. Actually, if you look at field theory, if you look at this choice in a situation of crisis, at what I have no influence on, I look at our tools at Gestalt, and because I talk with this community and I want to support you in this, you have this resource.
Ja, ich bin in einer Gestaltkonferenz online. Weiß ich nicht so genau, ich kann die nicht alle sehen. Warte mal, ich gucke mal, wie das Programm ist. Nein.
Well, apparently someone is speaking German. Exactly. Okay, may I continue?
Вот, соответственно, я пытаюсь найти какие-то ресурсы и возможности.
Okay, I'm trying to find certain resources and possibilities, and I'm also suggesting what you can do with your clients. And we're dealing with a very complicated situation, especially when people who are deprived of the roots or uprooted, using this metaphor again, are uprooted from their land and lose their roots. What can you offer them as Gestalt therapists? You can offer some values, the values we have, these meanings, this meaning making of Gestalt therapy, the choice we can make, what we can have an influence on, what we can't. And this has given me a lot, this resource in my personal life, that I can do a lot, realizing I can do a lot. I can support therapists thanks to modern technologies. I can support them across the world, and they will continue to support other people in making informed choices. And you realize that the value of Gestalt therapy is that we become aware of what we have an influence on, and of what influences us. And I don't want me to be influenced by the pole related to totalitarianism, to autocracy, to the deprivation of freedom, to violence. I also thought over all these months and years, because the war has been going on for years now, I have been thinking about this darkness, what kind of darkness we're dealing. About this evil, about this darkness. And we've been talking about it a lot within the Ukrainian community. And this metaphor surfaced from from a film, you know, this great evil. And I was thinking about the phenomenological description of it. What is evil? For me, it's violence. For me, it's destruction. For me, it's lack of freedom, annihilation of diversity, the impossibility of being yourself. And all this keeps happening in my life. When I felt better, the war in Israel started, and my whole other trauma started and gained strength. And this whole illusion of humanity, that the golden age would come and this possibility would emerge for people to learn to thrive, to respect each other's boundaries. But essentially, this golden age does not happen, and it's possible that it might actually never arrive. And I started thinking in the context of this metaphor of good and evil, of darkness and light, and I found this this foundation. Maybe darkness is there to make light stand out even more, because light is really bright when it stands out against the darkness. And our task is not to destroy this evil, but to make sure that it doesn't destroy the light. And the more we place it beyond the wall, literally in Israel, because Israel built the wall and thought that life would simply go on somehow beyond that wall. But there's this poem, and I don't know whether I'll be able to whether the interpreters will be able to translate this. There were animals standing at the door. They were being shot at, and they were dying. But some people came along who opened this door, who felt compassion for the animals, who went out to meet the song with laughter. The animals entered inside and everyone was killed. Unfortunately, again, a note from the Russian interpreter, we are losing the connection, so exactly, I think we've lost the speaker.
Ну да, у тебя плохая связь. Właśnie. Inaczej, ty możesz zadbać o lepsze...
Could you make sure that your internet is better?
Nie wiem, czy bez tej kamerki będzie lepiej słychać. Może to jest jakieś rozwiązanie.
Maybe if you switch off your camera, this could help.
Простите меня, пожалуйста, зависла я, да?
Да, сейчас отвисло, все хорошо.
Да, это индийский
Okay,
интернет.
we should be fine now.
Вот,
That's the internet we have here
и у меня мурашки по коже пошли.
in India.
Нет, не дочитала?
Не дочитала, да.
Где я прервалась?
Примерно на середине.
What? Okay. Where have we left? Okay, somewhere in the middle. All right. So there were animals next to a door. They were shot at and they were killed. But there were people who opened the door. They, with compassion, with songs and poetry, and the animals came in and everyone was killed. It was similar to what happened in Israel when bandits destroyed, killed huge numbers of civilians. But we have the split. When we divide into good and bad, we are very good, and they versus they are very bad. Then we cannot step out of that situation. I don't know how to be with this. I want to note that we in Gestalt are trying to maintain this whole, and so perhaps this metaphor, the evil, is there to shed a light, and perhaps all these reactions where people join in to support autocracy, perhaps they need to shed a light on different people and those who want to develop freedom, democracy, creativity, including also the possibility of defending yourself and your values instead of relaxing safety by building a wall. That will give us nothing, because behind those walls there will be tunnels like rockets being manufactured. I cannot give answers to the questions being raised longer than 45 minutes. All I want is to perhaps evoke interest. Each and every one of us makes that choice right now. So when we are uprooted, can become victims of such situations, and like we were saying that Poles were Negroes. The Ukrainians can experience this in other countries now. I've also had this experience that nobody needs me. But then when you stand firm on your own 2 feet, you take responsibility and start making some small steps. I think the freedom of humanity depends on very small steps. If we were to revisit the field theory, of course, all the functions, we found the possibility to meet here and now. I think that this new creative adjustment that we can use at this point, that people can join according to values and not territory, that we can join with those who share the same values as we. We are together. Kurt Levin said that we are the function of a field, but the function of diversity is also a function of a field. Many people hate Putin right now. He is the personification of evil. But for us, the task is to become stronger than him in all these little choices that we make. For example, if someone has migrated, is not able to adjust, adapt, but they need to do something new. For example, learn a new language, because cultural adaptation goes most often through language, and people say, no, I can't learn this language, I don't know how. But all children, nearly all children know the language. They've learned it when they were little. They talk improperly, incorrectly, they make mistakes, but they speak. And adults, who, on the other hand, feel uncomfortably, they feel that this creativity is depressed. So this is where we can work with our little voices. So I'm looking at the time that we have left. Do I see correctly that it's 5 minutes? Okay, I'm very sad because I have a lot of thoughts to share still. So maybe the last thing before I say my goodbyes. Does Gestalt therapy work with fixed aspect, attachment to the land? The fixation occurs there as well. The question is, how could we uproot it and root ourselves where we want to live? So I think that for many people now, it's possible to become the citizens of the world if you're not afraid to take in the language, at least to a minimum level. So all those who speak English, for example, they have more opportunities, whereas people who know 5, 6 other languages, they can be rooted in many cultures or many countries. It's impossible to join in herds and communities of people who are like-minded. I could continue talking and talking. You give much sense to my life right now. I was in the resistance when I got this invitation to participate in this conference, and I didn't even submit a subject. In Ukrainian, we have this word like elevation, elated, and to meet people with similar values that you can create a community with. So I wanted to thank you that despite not having a topic in the agenda, that you came here, that you could come here and listen to me, and I hope we'll have some feedback from you. I want to listen to how you feel, so please feel invited to share perhaps some comments or questions, please.
Елена, первая.
Да, спасибо большое. Я прям почувствовала такое желание отозваться. Спасибо, Инна, большое за доклад.
Thank you very much. I felt this need to share. Thank you very much for what you've been talking about, that you need to choose your people, I've been living in Poland for a long time now. When the war started and many people from Ukraine came, I have heard comments like that I speak. Okay, let me choose the language here. I have often heard comments that I speak Russian, although I'm from Ukraine, and I found it in myself that I cannot hate all Russians. Because they haven't hurt me, not all of them have hurt me. There are good people in every nation. And that is how I hear it. Not to split into nations, into countries where people live, but instead look for people who share the same values so that the puzzle can become complete. Thank you very much for your speech. I'm very touched when I think about my relations with my colleagues from Russia and Ukraine. When I was talking about totalitarian countries, I don't know what share the space with people who decided to stay in those spaces. I don't have enough trust sometimes, perhaps. Perhaps those colleagues are very conscious, but can you do Gestalt therapy in a totalitarian country? That is a huge question for me. If the figure sets the context, so if I cannot speak about war in Russia or Belarus or Iran, how can we say about Gestalt therapy? Maybe it's some support consultation. That's a huge question. I don't want to attack my colleagues from Russia, but it is a big important problem for me as a citizen of the world, of Ukraine and Israel. Again, it's a big question touching upon responsibility. What am I doing now? How am I practicing this? How do I participate in the social life? What have I done in this area? I don't want my colleagues to go to the streets to riot, but I'm thinking about this. Lena and I spoke about this, have been speaking about this often. Being in one space for Ukrainians, we are toxic to one another. So people who live in Russia are toxic towards us and vice versa, because we are on two opposites. So it's an important question that I wanted to talk about as well. There were, I think Christina and Luisa have had questions as well. Anna, what about you? And I wanted to say that I am Russian. I left. I am Russian. I'm impressed.
Мне просто не верится. Я слышу,
I
что
feel respect towards what you're saying, and I hear that you have more understanding and space to think about what how Russians feel who support their totalitarian regime, and the resources that I have in myself. I have very few resources to think about it. I want to thank you, and I want to say that I feel respect. I am on a path of sorts which is very difficult. It's very difficult for me to So I stopped communicating even with close friends who have made this choice to support. I cannot find enough resources in me, so I'm ashamed to say that I don't want to approach them like person to person. I'm very grateful that you appeared here, and I'd like to stay in touch with people like you because I have broken ties in Russia as well, those who are there, but I'd like to connect to those who share the same values as we have. For me, it's very precious. Before the outbreak of war, conference, then I left country. I read about the conference in the press, and then I saw the recordings weren't available. I was afraid to write you, to turn to you, and I was thinking about you, about the institute. Thank you very, very much. It is a very valuable meeting for me. Thank you for this conference. Here in the background, I have 3 Buddhas.
Вот, видите? Прекрасно. Я
And 3
рада.
beautiful women. So I'm very happy. It's been so nice to see you. I think these recordings will become available, and some new ones will be created. I think I need a break. Thank you for this meeting. It seems it's been a very deep meeting. You're definitely not an empty line in the agenda, despite it being empty. It was really full. It was very warm and very nice. Thank you.
Спасибо вам за приглашение. Я действительно лекцию написала уже после первого дня конференции, но я так делаю. Я настраиваюсь на поле и пытаюсь понять, что поле хочет от меня, какой информации, и писала ее лично для вас. Надеюсь, она имела для вас смысл. Хорошего продолжения конференции. До новых встреч.
Dziękuję bardzo. Dziękuję bardzo. Inna kończy ze wzruszeniem.
Спасибо.